Returning to the worthless inheritance his grandfather left him, veteran Harry Parker only hoped to find some final peace, but his loyal dog Ghost began to act strangely. He barked incessantly at the old, dilapidated treehouse they called the fortress. A persistent, urgent bark, not for a wild animal, but as if he was trying to warn Harry about something hidden inside. Trusting his companion, Harry found an old, locked chest, an object that shouldn't have been there. He soon realized this wasn't a forgotten childhood memento, but a Pandora's box containing a secret his grandfather had buried for 70 years. A secret that could explain why he was left out of the will, and also a truth that could make him face dangerous forces he knew nothing about. What, in the end, was hidden inside that chest? Blank, blank. The law office of Mr. Anderson smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and quiet disappointment. It was a small, stuffy room in downtown Port Angeles, Washington, where the salty air of the strait seemed to be held at bay by thick, unopenable windows. Harry Parker sat perfectly still on a hard wooden chair, his back straight, a posture drilled into him over a decade in the army. His companion, Ghost, lay silently, a warm and steady weight across his worn leather boots. Ghost was a 5-year-old German shepherd, a calm, watchful soul, and now his entire world consisted of the man whose feet he was guarding. He could sense the tension in the room. Harry, in his mid-30s, was tall and lean, his face weathered by the suns of foreign deserts. He wore a simple gray t-shirt under an unbuttoned flannel shirt, a stark contrast to the stiff formality of his surroundings. Across from him sat his cousin, Joe Parker. Where Harry was lean, Joe was soft and thick-set, his expensive suit straining. He radiated an aura of restless ambition. Mr. Anderson, the elderly lawyer, had served the Parker family for 2 generations. His voice was a dry monotone, listing assets with dispassionate precision. The main family home, the stocks and bonds, the 312 acres of prime timberland, all of it was bequeathed to his grandson Joe Parker. Harry stared at a spot on the aged Persian rug, focusing on the intricate pattern, trying to keep his breathing even. He hadn't expected the world. He knew he had drifted from his grandfather since leaving the service, but Ben was the one who had taught him everything that mattered. He couldn't believe Ben would forget him entirely. Finally, Mr. Anderson paused. "To my grandson, Harry Parker. I give to him sole ownership of the parcel of land registered as the Lone Oak Meadow, a plot of 2 acres located on the western edge of the main property." A stifled cough came from Aunt Carol. Joe Parker leaned back in his chair, a slow, self-satisfied smirk spreading across his face. He knew, as they all did, what the Lone Oak Meadow was. It was a steep, rocky hillside, impossible to build on, landlocked with no public road access. And worst of all, years ago Grandpa Ben had placed the plot under a scenic conservation easement. Nothing could be built. Nothing could be logged. His inheritance was legally and physically worthless. Joe leaned forward, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Well, Harry, at least you get to keep your old playground." The words hung in the air, sharp and humiliating. Harry felt his face flush with heat, a mix of anger and profound sorrow, but he did not speak. When Mr. Anderson slid the papers across the desk, Harry signed his name with a steady hand. "Come on, Ghost," he said, his voice low. Outside, the cool, damp air of the Pacific Northwest felt like a blessing. Harry finally let his composure crumble. He knelt, burying his face in the thick fur of Ghost's neck. "It's not the money, boy," Harry whispered. "I never cared about the money, but he left me nothing. He left me a ghost, a memory I can't even get to." He felt erased, judged. He stood up, wiping his eyes on the sleeve of his flannel shirt. The treehouse, the fortress. It had been their sanctuary, their castle. A new feeling began to replace the hurt, a deep, driving need to understand. His grandfather had been a deliberate man. He never did anything without a reason. There had to be a reason for this. "Come on, boy," he said, his voice clearer now. "Let's go see our fortress. Blank. The drive out of town was a journey through a landscape of memories. To get to his inheritance, Harry had to park on the shoulder of a logging road and walk, crossing onto the main property, now legally Joe's. After a 10-minute walk, the dense canopy gave way, and they stepped into the clearing, the Lone Oak Meadow. In its center, magnificent and solitary, stood the ancient Gary Oak, a giant whose moss-covered branches seemed to hold up the sky. High in its boughs sat the fortress. Harry gripped the old, thick rope of the ladder and began to climb. The inside of the fortress smelled of decaying wood, dust, and the faint, sweet scent of old rainwater. His gaze swept the dusty floorboards, and then he saw it. Tucked in the driest corner, partially hidden by a faded canvas tarp, was a small wooden chest. It was old, made of dark, heavy wood, and bound with straps of rusted iron. A thick, archaic padlock held it shut. Here was something, a tangible piece of his grandfather's life, but it was locked away. He looked around the small space, scanning the walls for a hidden key, a clue, anything. And then he saw it. On the main support beam, next to their old carving of B+H, was a symbol freshly etched into the wood. It was a simple image, a flat oval shape, and beneath it, 3 wavy parallel lines. Harry stared at it. It meant nothing to him, and yet it felt familiar. Like a half-forgotten dream, the memory came back to him in a sun-drenched flash. Summer of 1999. He was 10 years old. He and Grandpa Ben were down at the creek that marked the edge of the meadow. Ben was teaching him how to skip stones. Ben had a special stone he called his magic stone, a perfect piece of slate, flat and oval. "Every man needs a secret place to keep his treasures, Jack," Ben had said. He had then reached for a specific rock in the small retaining wall they had built. He pulled it free. Behind it was a small, dark hollow. He placed his magic skipping stone inside. See? Safe and sound. The image in his mind was so clear, the oval stone, the wavy lines of the creek. Harry's eyes snapped open. He knew. He scrambled down the ladder. He ran across the meadow, the dog bounding joyfully beside him. He reached the creek, kneeling, running his hands over the cool, damp stones. He pushed and pulled at several before his fingers found it. A rock, about the size of a loaf of bread, shifted under his touch. He pulled the rock free, revealing a dark, earthy-smelling hollow. And there, nestled inside, wrapped in a piece of old, cracked oilskin, was a heavy, old-fashioned iron key, Acre, blank, underscore, blank. He returned to the fortress. He knelt before the chest, the iron key feeling heavy and significant in his hand. He pushed it into the keyhole of the ancient padlock. It slid in with a grating sound. He turned it, with a loud, dry click. Harry took a deep breath and lifted the heavy wooden lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, were 3 things: a thick, leather-bound journal, a single ornate silver key small and intricate, and underneath them a small black-and-white photograph, faded at the edges, of a young man in a soldier's uniform. The mystery his grandfather had left him was just beginning. Harry picked up the photograph first. It showed a young man in an American Army uniform, unmistakably his grandfather, Ben Parker, but a version of him Harry had never known. Standing beside him was a young woman with a gentle smile and dark hair. In her arms she held a bundled infant. On the back, in his grandfather's neat script, were 3 words: Ben, Ingrid, and Jennifer. Names he had never heard before. A woman and a child who were not part of the Parker family history. He picked up the journal. The first entry was dated May 1955. "My name is Benjamin Parker, and I am a soldier stationed near a small town in West Germany. I am writing this because there are some stories a man cannot speak aloud, but that he must not let die." Harry began to read. Ben wrote of meeting Ingrid, a local woman who had lost her entire family in the war. I have regretted it every single day since Harry had to stop reading. This was the secret his grandfather had carried. A hidden grief, a lost family. It explains so much, the deep-seated sorrow that even a lifetime of peace in America could not erase. He continued reading. The journal spanned decades. Ben wrote of trying to find her in the 1970s, but the adoption records had been sealed. "I failed her twice," he wrote in an entry from 1995, "once when I gave her away, and again when I could not find her. I know Joe sees this land as timber and money. You, Harry, you were always different. You hear it, That is why I must trust this to you. The final entry was dated only a few months ago. I am an old man now. I have set things in motion. The silver key opens a post office box in town. It is the beginning of a path I laid long ago. A path to a legacy I created for her, a piece of this land that I kept safe, a place worthy of her name. I pray you are the one reading this, Harry. I pray you will finish the journey for me, find her, or find what is left of her. Harry finally understood. The will wasn't a punishment, it was a test. A carefully constructed puzzle left for the one person his grandfather believed would care enough to solve it. He hadn't been disinherited. He had been entrusted with a mission. He looked at the small, ornate silver key. It was a promise. The start of a journey to correct a 70-year-old mistake. "Come on, boy," Harry said, his voice firm and clear. "We have a trip to make. Blank, underscore, blank." The Port Angeles post office was a plain, functional building. Harry found the wall of brass-fronted boxes, his eyes scanning the numbers until he found it. Box 314. He knelt, Ghost sitting faithfully beside him. His hand was steady as he inserted the silver key. It turned smoothly. Inside was a single, thick manila envelope, yellowed with age. He drove back to his small, rented apartment. He sat at his kitchen table, the envelope lying before him. Ghost came and rested his heavy head on Harry's knee. With a deep breath, Harry broke the brittle seal. Inside were 2 sets of documents. The first was a thick sheaf of legal papers. The language was dense, but the key phrases leaped out. Irrevocable trust, beneficiary Jennifer Parker and her legal descendants. The principal asset? Harry's eyes widened as he read the description. The documents laid out in precise legal terms the creation of a separate, protected parcel of land 30 years ago. His grandfather had legally severed 80 acres from the main Parker property. 80 acres of the most valuable, untouched old-growth forest in the entire area. The land was officially and legally named the Jennifer Preserve. Beneath the legal documents was a second envelope. On the front, in his grandfather's familiar hand, was written, "Harry." He opened it. The letter inside was dated just 6 months ago. "My dearest Harry, if you are reading this, then my last hope has been fulfilled. The will was a test. I had to be sure. I needed a soldier for this mission, Harry. I needed you. The papers you hold are the legal proof of what I did 30 years ago. I created a sanctuary for Jennifer, the daughter I lost. It is protected, legally separate from everything else. Joe cannot touch it. But a legacy is meaningless if it is never claimed. My search for Jennifer failed. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to finish what I could not. Find her, Harry. Bring them home to the land that has been waiting for them. This is my true last will and testament. I am leaving you with a great burden, I know, but also with a purpose. Sometimes a soldier needs a mission to find his way home. Love you, grandson. Grandpa Ben." Harry read the letter once, then twice, the words blurring through a film of tears. The wound the will had inflicted was healed by this powerful surge of love and trust. He had a mission. But as the initial rush faded, a new feeling crept in. Doubt. He was just a man who had been struggling to keep his own life together. He bowed his head, resting his forehead on the cool wood of the table. Then he felt a gentle, persistent nudge against his arm. Ghost was standing beside him, his big, intelligent eyes fixed on Harry's face. The dog nudged Harry's arm again, more insistently. "What is it? What's our next move?" Looking into those unwavering, loyal eyes, Harry saw only absolute trust. "Okay, boy," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "You're right. We have work to do." The trail started with a name, Jennifer Parker, and a city, Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was a direction. Blank, underscore, blank. Seattle was a world of concrete, glass, and ceaseless noise. Harry drove his old pickup through the dense traffic. Ghost sat tense, a furry anchor in a sea of overwhelming newness. The first 2 days were a frustrating exercise in bureaucracy. Harry spent hours at the King County Public Records Office, scrolling through digitized archives. He searched for Jennifer Parker. On the afternoon of the second day, he found her, a marriage certificate from 1982. Jennifer Parker had married a man named Raj Sharma. With a new name to search for, the trail grew warmer. He found a death certificate for Jennifer Sharma, dated 5 years ago. He was too late. But then he found one more document. A birth certificate from 1985 for a daughter, Anya Sharma. Mother, Jennifer Sharma. Maternal grandfather, Benjamin Parker. Harry felt a jolt of astonished irony. Dr. Anya Sharma was an associate professor of botany at the University of Washington, a respected expert in the ecology of old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest. Harry found the botany department and its associated greenhouses. He found Dr. Anya Sharma in a large, humid greenhouse, carefully measuring a soil sample. She was a woman in her late 30s with intelligent, focused brown eyes. "Excuse me, Dr. Sharma," Harry said. "My name is Harry Parker. I was hoping to talk to you about a specific parcel of land out on the peninsula. It belonged to my grandfather, Ben Parker." At the mention of the name and the land, a flicker of sharp, intense interest came into her eyes. "I'm familiar with the Parker property," she said. "I've been trying to get research access to a section of it for years, an unmapped 80-acre parcel of old growth on the western boundary." "That's the one," Harry said. The Jennifer Preserve Anya's eyes narrowed. "How do you know that name?" "That designation isn't on any public map." "It's a long story," Harry said. "My grandfather passed away recently. He left me a journal and some legal papers. It turns out that land, the 80 acres you've been studying, was put into a private trust 30 years ago." "For whom?" Anya asked, her skepticism evident for his daughter, a woman named Jennifer. Harry said, watching her face carefully. "For your mother." Anya stared at him. A look of complete and utter disbelief crossed her face. "I think you have the wrong person, Mr. Parker. My mother was an orphan. Her parents died when she was an infant. That's what she was told." "That's what she was told," Harry said gently. He handed her the official, notarized legal deed for the trust. "My grandfather was her father. That makes him your grandfather." She took the papers, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. She read them, her scientist's eyes scanning the legal language. The document was undeniable. This is impossible," she whispered. "My grandfather's letter asked me to do one thing," Harry replied simply. "To find his daughter or her descendants and tell them the truth. To bring them home to the land that has been waiting for them." Anya looked up from the papers and stared at Harry, truly seeing him for the first time. "If this is real, what do you want?" "I want you to see it," Harry said. "You need to see it." Her curiosity, the driving force of her entire life, was at war with her skepticism. In the end, the scientist won. "I'll come to Port Angeles." She said, "I need to see this land for myself. Blank, _ blank. Rewritten script, part 3 of 3. The drive back was long and quiet. Anya sat in the passenger seat, the legal documents resting in her lap. The story Harry told her was emotional, but the legal deed was a hard, verifiable fact. Harry respected her silence. Ghost sat behind them, a calm, steadying force. To get to the preserve, Harry pulled off onto a small, unmarked service road. He showed Anya an old map, hand-drawn by his grandfather. "This area is mislabeled." Harry explained he called it unstable terrain. "This is the only true map." The hike was not long, but the forest was dense. They stopped before a sheer rock face. "The entrance doesn't look like much," Harry said, pointing to a narrow fissure between two enormous boulders, almost completely hidden by a curtain of drooping sword ferns. Anya pushed aside the wet, heavy fronds and stepped through the gap, and the world changed. The air grew instantly cooler, hushed, and still. All around them, ancient trees soared hundreds of feet into the air. Western red cedars with bark like shredded cinnamon. Towering Douglas firs, their bark thick and deeply furrowed. The sunlight filtered down in soft, hazy beams, like the light through a stained glass window. Anya, the scientist, simply stopped. The breath left her lungs. Her professional detachment, her skepticism, all dissolved in a wave of pure, unadulterated awe. This is a climax ecosystem," she whispered, her voice sounding small and inadequate in the vast silence. "Some of these trees, they must be over 800 years old." They walked deeper into the grove. They came to a creek, its water so clear it looked like liquid glass. It was then that Ghost, ranging slightly ahead, suddenly froze. He stood stock still, his body rigid, a low, dangerous growl rumbling deep in his chest. His nose was pointed directly at the base of a colossal cedar tree near the creek bank. "What is it, boy?" Harry said softly. As they got closer, they saw what had alerted Ghost. Tucked behind a curtain of hanging moss was a small, neat slash of fluorescent orange survey paint. Anya's face hardened. "Someone's been here," she said, her voice cold. Harry scanned the area. There, strapped to a fir tree about 30 yards away, partially hidden, was a small, modern trail camera. Its lens was pointed directly at the heart of the grove. The peaceful, sacred feeling of the forest evaporated, replaced by a harsh, ugly reality. Pioneer Logging knew. They had trespassed, surveyed, and spied on this sanctuary. Hill, blank, underscore, blank. That evening, the sterile motel room felt like a different planet. Anya looked at Harry that journal. She said, "May I read it?" Quote. Harry handed it to her, then took Ghost out for a long walk. Anya sat under the dim light of the bedside lamp and began to read. She saw the photograph. The sad-eyed German girl and the baby, her mother. She felt the raw pain in Ben Parker's words as he described giving his daughter away, and his final desperate plan to leave a legacy for a family he might never know. The forest was no longer just a priceless ecosystem. It was her inheritance, her mother's legacy, the final desperate gift of a grandfather she had never met. And it was under threat. When Harry and Ghost returned, Anya's tears had dried, but her eyes burned with a new, fierce light. Her scientific detachment was gone. "This fight," she said, her voice ringing with absolute determination, "is mine now." The next morning, Harry drove up the long gravel driveway to the main Parker cabin. Joe's expensive pickup was parked near the front steps. "What do you want?" Harry Joe asked. His face hardened into defensive resentment. "We need to talk to you, Joe." Harry said, "This is Dr. Anya Sharma." Anya stepped forward, holding out the legal deed, Mr. Parker. 30 years ago, Ben Parker placed 80 acres of the western old-growth forest into a private trust. It's called the Jennifer Preserve. It was never yours to inherit. I am Jennifer's daughter. That land is legally mine. Joe's face went pale. He stared at the document, then at Anya. "This is ridiculous. Some kind of trick. I've already signed the preliminary contracts. Pioneer Logging. I've already spent it." Quote. "Spend it on what?" Joe Harry asked. "On debts." Joe shouted, "The deal with Pioneer was my only way out. That 80 acres, that was the prize. That's what made the deal so valuable." Quote. "So you knew about it." Harry's voice was dangerously quiet. "You knew there was an old-growth forest there, and you were going to let them destroy it." "It's just trees, Harry," Joe yelled. "Just trees that can finally make this family some real money." Quote. As their argument grew louder, a sleek black SUV purred up the driveway. A man in a tailored dark suit stepped out. "Mr. Davies, the lawyer for Pioneer Logging." "Having some trouble?" Joe Davies asked, his voice smooth as silk. He focused on Anya and the document in her hand. "Dr. Anya Sharma, I presume. We were wondering when you might turn up. A 30-year-old private trust that has never been activated and has a deceased primary beneficiary. Our legal team is confident it won't stand up to a real court challenge. We will bury you in motions, or you can be sensible. Pioneer Logging is prepared to offer you a generous sum to release your claim. $25,000. "The land is not for sale," Anya said, her voice like ice. "A pity," Davies replied. He turned to Joe. "We will handle this. Our contract with you remains in effect." "That contract includes land that doesn't belong to Joe," Harry said. At Harry's movement, Ghost rose to his feet. He didn't bark, but a low, deep growl vibrated the wooden planks of the porch. Davis's cold gaze fell on the dog, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. "You're a king with no kingdom and no road to get there," Joe taunted, leaning into the lawyer's confidence. Harry said nothing. He looked at Anya and gave a slight shake of his head. This was not the time. They turned and walked back to the truck. The front line had been drawn, and they now knew the full measure of the enemy. Blank, underscore, blank. The small motel room, transformed into a war room. We're not going to let them win, Harry said. "We can't beat them in a straight legal battle, not right now. But we can outmaneuver them. We need a plan, a comprehensive plan." Anya's scientific mind began to whirl. A sustainable business model, ecotourism, scientific research opportunities, educational programs. We need projected revenue, job creation numbers, something that proves the land is worth more standing than cut down. Harry joined her, his military training kicking in. We need to map out the opposition. Who on the county council is beholden to Pioneer? What's their timeline? We need to build a compelling narrative. Grandpa Ben's story, Jennifer's story, your story. They worked for days, fueled by stale coffee and an unwavering resolve. Anya reached out to university colleagues. Harry delved into local politics. Ghost lay under the table, a silent furry partner. One evening, exhausted, they took a break. Anya rubbed her tired eyes. "I always felt like a piece of me was missing, a longing for roots." "Me too," Harry admitted softly. "Since I left the service, I felt aimless, a gun without a target. Grandpa Ben always knew what I needed, even now." He told her the story of the fortress, of the storm, and how Ben had sat with him, telling him that the roots run deep. "When I read the journal," Anya said, her voice soft, "when I saw the preserve, it was like finding those roots, like finding a part of myself I didn't know existed. The preserve isn't just an ecosystem for me anymore. It's a family heirloom." In that moment, the cautious alliance melted away. They were no longer just allies in a fight, they were family. _blank. The air was heavy with rain as Harry drove up to the main cabin one last time. Joe was on the porch. Harry walked up the steps and handed his cousin a single, summarized sheet of their plan. The potential revenue from ecotourism, the capital from selling carbon credits, the long-term job creation. "Look, Joe," Harry began, his tone free of judgment. "I know you're in a tough spot, but selling it all to Pioneer, that's a one-time solution. This is a way forward, a way to build something that lasts." Joe took the paper, his eyes scanning the numbers. For the first time, he saw a real, viable alternative to the deal that had felt like his only lifeline. Before Harry could respond, a black SUV came purring up the driveway. This time, it was Mr. Warren, the regional director of acquisitions for Pioneer. "Joe, my friend." Warren boomed, his smile a bloodless reptilian/I was in the area. "Thought I'd stop by with the final contracts. We can get this all signed and done today." He glanced at the paper in Joe's hand and his smile tightened. "Listen, Joe, we're businessmen. We deal in reality. Your grandfather was a sentimental old man who let a fortune in timber rot on the stump. This whole business with the secret heir is a distraction. We can begin logging the undisputed 300 acres immediately while the rest gets sorted out." He pulled a sheaf of papers and a gold pin from his jacket pocket. "It's time to decide, Joe. Are you a Parker who wants to sit on a pile of old firewood and tell stories? Or are you the Parker who finally turns this family's name into something that matters? The Warren Parker Resort has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" "This is our home," Harry said, his voice dangerously low. Warren finally turned his full, contemptuous attention on Harry. "Your home? You're the soldier boy who ran away, weren't you? Came back with nothing but a dog and a sad story. You have no say here. This is a multi-million-dollar deal. You're a nobody." He took a step toward Harry, jabbing a finger aggressively at his chest. In that instant, a blur of gray and white motion erupted from the truck. Ghost moved with the silent, terrifying speed of a predator. He cleared the space in a heartbeat and planted himself squarely between Harry and Mr. Warren. His body was a rigid wall of muscle, his lips curled back from his teeth, and a growl, a sound that seemed to come from the very core of the earth, vibrated the wooden planks of the porch. Mr. Warren, the man of suits and contracts, screamed. He stumbled backward and fell in a heap against the porch railing. Joe stood frozen. He saw the naked greed on Warren's face, he heard the man's casual dismissal of his grandfather, and he saw Ghost, a creature of pure, unwavering loyalty, willing to stand against any threat to protect his family. In that one stark moment, something inside Joe Parker finally broke. "Get off my property," Joe said, his voice shaking, but not with fear, with rage. Warren, scrambling to his feet, sputtered, "What, Joe? Don't be a fool!" Quote, "I said get off!" Joe roared. He snatched the contracts from the floor and ripped them in half. "The deal is off!" Quote. Warren stared at the torn papers, then at Joe's furious face, and finally at the still growling German shepherd. He scurried into his SUV and sped down the driveway. Joe was breathing heavily, the torn contract pieces fluttering from his hand. He looked at Harry, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of shame, relief, and a dawning respect. "You were right," Joe said, his voice barely a whisper. "I almost sold his soul. Our soul." He looked down at the summary sheet of their plan. "What do we do now?" "Now," Harry said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Now we fight, blank, underscore, blank." The Port Angeles Town Hall was packed to capacity. The sole item on the agenda was the zoning permit application for the Pioneer Logging Development. Mr. Warren presented first, a slick and polished performance full of impressive charts and glossy renderings of a luxury resort. He finished by reminding the council of his legally binding contract with Mr. Joe Parker, the rightful owner of the land. Then it was the Parker family's turn. Anya walked to the podium. She did not speak of emotion, but of facts. She explained the ecological significance of the old-growth forest, its role as a carbon sink, and the critical importance of the watershed. She then presented their alternative plan, the Parker Legacy Plan, detailing the long-term sustainable jobs from ecotourism and research. Next, Harry took the podium. He didn't bring charts. He brought a story. "My grandfather, Ben Parker, loved this land." Harry began, his voice quiet but clear. "He taught me that our job wasn't to own the land, but to be its caretaker. Progress is important. But progress that destroys the very soul of a place isn't progress at all. It's a surrender." Mr. Warren stood up, a condescending smile on his face. "It's a touching story, but it is just that, a story. We have a contract. And we have the full cooperation of the landowner, Mr. Joe Parker." All eyes turned to Joe. He walked to the podium. "Mr. Warren is right about one thing." Joe began, his voice unsteady but clear. "I was cooperating with him. I was lost. I saw the trees and I only saw the money. I was wrong." He held up his copy of the Pioneer Logging Agreement. He looked directly at Mr. Warren, whose face had gone rigid with fury. "This deal is off," Joe said. Then, with a decisive, powerful motion, he tore the contract in half. "I am fully supporting the Parker Legacy Plan," Joe announced, his voice gaining strength. "We will work together as a family to build a future for this land that honors its past." The room erupted. Mayor Thompson called for order. She made a motion to indefinitely postpone the decision, pending a full independent environmental impact study on the entire watershed. The motion passed 7-0. The Pioneer deal was dead. Grise, blank, underscore, blank. 3 months later, the autumn sun cast a warm golden light over the Lone Oak Meadow. High in the branches of the ancient Gary Oak, the fortress was no longer dilapidated. Its floorboards were new, its roof patched. Harry, Anya, and Joe sat around a small table inside, blueprints and sketches spread out before them. Lying at their feet was Ghost, watching his family, his calm brown eyes reflecting the peace that had finally settled over them all. "If we build the visitor cabins here," Joe was saying, pointing to the map, "they'll have a view of the mountains without disturbing the main grove." Quote. "And the research station can be located near the creek," Anya added. "We've already secured 2 research grants from the university." Harry leaned back, a genuine, easy smile on his face. "Grandpa Ben would be proud," he said softly. "He would." Anya agreed. "But this isn't just his legacy anymore, is it?" "No," Joe said, looking up from the plans. "This is ours." Harry reached down and stroked Ghost's head. The soldier had completed his mission. He had found the lost heir, he had saved the forest, and in doing so, he had saved his family. He had finally found his way home. The true will had finally been fulfilled. Perhaps a true inheritance is not something we are given, but something we find along the way. It is rarely written on paper, but lives in the unwavering loyalty of a faithful heart, guiding us toward the family we were always meant to have.